It's showtime.
Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Season's greetings, all.
Here, you switch it up this week.
Yeah, season's greetings. That wonderful time of the year.
Absolutely. Season's greetings to everyone that's watching us. And it's kind of embarrassing, Ted, when you have a book out on overcoming procrastination and you're procrastinating when you're holiday shopping. It's embarrassing. Now, so I'm talking to somebody the other day, Ted, and I'm like, I've been putting it off. I've been procrastinating. The guy says to me, I know this great book on overcoming procrastination called The Discipline of Now. You should read it, Eric. Like, that's
Touche.
Thank you.
Touche.
Yeah, that was good. I had to give him credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
But now hopefully everyone's having a great holiday and really taking the time to be thankful and spending it with the people that are important to you, your loved ones. And hope you get an opportunity to take some time to relax during the holiday as well. Certainly, as you can see by now, this is not your everyday podcast. Now, we do things a little different. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to warn our guest of the hour of how different we do things.
Learn today. You're going to learn today, Carole Brody. You're going to learn today.
I'm here to learn. I'm here for it.
But now we'll give her a formal introduction. But I mean, she's over 1,300 interviews, been on Good Morning America.
Really?
She's been there, done that, has the T-shirt.
All right, Carole Brody Fleet. I think I'm gonna always say Carole Brody Fleet because I kind of like the way it just rolls off.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm like, hey, how you doing, Carole Brody Fleet?
I'm good. How are you? You guys are clearly doing great.
Man, we're great. We are great.
I'll tell you, if I'm having a rough day, I'm calling you guys. You guys are awesome.
Call us. I'm telling you, you gotta get us both on the line together. We're not like this when we're separate. You got to get us together.
Absolutely.
Right.
You guys will be taking this show on the road, I assume. Like,
I know.
Setting some improvs and stuff.
I know. I try to take the show on the road. Eric takes it on the road oftentimes without me, though, Carole Brody Fleet. Like, now I'm gonna, wait a second. Is that my Eric up there that's up there doing that? What?
Let me tell you, Carole. Again, vicious rumors. This can't be substantiated.
Terrible.
That's right.
Carole Brody Fleet, it can't be substantiated. I will show you some online things that I am not on. He is by himself. I tried to call you, Ted. I tried to call you. No, you didn't. I knew you'd be busy. That's what people say. I knew you'd be too busy.
My phone died.
I knew you'd be too busy.
My phone was dead.
That's it. I knew you'd be busy. I didn't want to bother you. I know this is your busy season.
Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, as you can see, one of our goals, we want to help you to laugh, to learn, and then ultimately level up. And if you feel like we've done that for you, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show.
Absolutely. Make sure you pass this information on to someone that can use it. And Carole's story is just amazing. I mean, what she's overcome, she's getting all of that. But definitely don't keep this information to yourself. And don't forget about the What Now movement. And it's interesting, and this stood out to me when I first talked to Carole several weeks ago, this whole idea of what now. It's real. Our theme and our mission is very similar to what Carole is looking to accomplish as well. So make sure those of you, if you haven't already, go to the What Now movement Facebook group and make sure you join. Today is Motivational Monday. Definitely go in there so you can be inspired. So Ted.
Yes, Eric.
I've got something that's on my mind.
Please share, Eric.
I will. And before I do definitely want to make sure that those of you who are I see people logging on now, if you could make sure you're commenting. We want to chat back and forth with you. So definitely, put your name in, put your comment in. If you have a question, make sure you ask the question. But yeah, so I really want to talk about moving from what happened to what now.
Ooh.
Moving from what happened to what now. And this story is just one of my favorites when it comes to this. And I've told it on this show before, but I think it bears repeating based on our guest today. So the story's told, there was this old farmer and he had this horse, and one day the horse runs away. And the farmer's neighbor comes over and says, "Hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your horse." To which the farmer replies, "Who knows what's good or bad?" The next day the horse comes back bringing with him 12 additional horses. Like, "Wow, congratulations on your great fortune, man," says the neighbor. And the farmer replies, "Who really knows what's good or bad?" The next day, while attempting to tame one of the wild horses, the farmer's son gets thrown and breaks his leg. The neighbor comes back over. "Oh my goodness, man, I am sorry to hear about your son." To which the farmer replies, "Who knows what's good or bad?" The next day, the army comes through town. They're looking for able-bodied young men to fight in the war. The son is spared from battle because of his broken leg. And by now you know how the neighbor and the farmer responded, right? And here's the big takeaway. Here's the reason I told you that story. I want you to really understand this. And this is the part of the show where we need your undivided attention. I know we have a lot of people that you listen to us while you're driving. I just need you to pull over to the side of the road right now. I get it. You listen to us while you're in the gym on the treadmill. This is where you need to press pause on the treadmill. Ted, anything else the people need to do?
Carole Brody Fleet, put the ham sandwich down. This is the time to put the ham sandwich down.
I do not have a ham sandwich. Don't talk. He's starting those rumors again there, Eric.
yeah, exactly.
I am without sandwich at this time.
That's right.
All right, good. Put the ham sandwich down. I mean, the theme of this is moving from what happened to what now. And here's the key thing you need to understand. Everything is happening for you and not just to you. That's really the key takeaway. Even if you're dealing with tragedies, adversities, we all deal with things, but we don't understand why it's happening to us in that moment. But we just have to go through life with the understanding that everything is happening for you and not just to you. And I bring that up because our guest today, her message was birthed from her personal experience with adversity. And everything happened for her to be an inspiration to people. And that's how you have to look at it. And she's widely recognized as America's go-to expert in grief and life adversity recovery. She's a multi-award winning author of 4 books, including the international bestseller Widows Wear Stilettos, now in its 2nd edition. Widows Wear Stilettos. She's a regular contributor to the iconic Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. As a frequent media contributor, she's made nearly 1,300 radio appearances to date and has additionally appeared on numerous podcasts, television programs, as well as in the worldwide print and web media. So her message is what now and what next? What's next? Carole, she offers practical, emotional, and even humorous guidance to the millions who have experienced loss or any kind of challenge. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-Minute Hour podcast, Carole Brody Fleet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. Great to be here with you guys.
It's truly an honor to have you on, and congratulations to you on all of your accomplishments. And it just I'm just going to be dropping your name a lot here. Hey, I was on with Carole Brody Fleet.
Did I tell you that we had Carole Brody Fleet on the show the other day?
Thank you. Well, that's so nice and so humbling. But all of it hopefully just results in one goal and one thing, and that is getting the message out to those who need to hear it. That has always been my goal, is just one more. You wake up every day and you think, just one more. If I can reach just one more person who is in pain, who's in despair, who feels alone, who feels like there is no tomorrow because today for them just ended. And they don't know what tomorrow looks like. And they don't even want to know what tomorrow looks like. If I can reach that one person, if you two can reach that one person, you've done your job.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let's roll back the clock. I want to give the people some context.
Okay.
So what were the life experiences that led to you becoming this expert in life adversity recovery?
Well, it came from an experience that actually, millions of people sadly experience every day. Life for us in the late 90s was going on wonderfully, actually. My husband, Michael, was a 28-year veteran of his police department here in Southern California. And he was a veteran of the armed forces before that. He saw combat in Vietnam. So he really spent his entire adult life in service to his country and then to his community. Our daughter, Kendall, at the time was 9 years old, and she was really busy being a 9-year-old. I hail from the legal profession. That's where I am educated and degreed. And that's where we were when Mike was diagnosed with ALS. That's more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm grateful that in recent years it's become more well known. There was a time when I would come on and say ALS and they'd say, what? Nobody knew what it was. Well, now happily awareness has been raised. And we now know that ALS is a terminal illness. There's no other way to put it. There is no treatment at this time. There is no known cure. And the prognosis from diagnosis to death is between 2 and 5 years. Yesterday, we celebrated the anniversary of Mike's death, and we remembered his life. And toward the end of his battle, which was just over 2.5 years, he said, I don't want to be remembered for a disease. You need to find a way to take our family's experiences and use it to the good by helping other people. And at that moment in time, at that season in time, I had no idea what he was talking about because we were in survival mode and we'd been that way since he was diagnosed. Well, it was a few years after he passed away, and I was left a widowed parent with no sense of direction. I got my hands on some of the grief books that were available, and they were good books, but they weren't talking to me in a way that I needed to be spoken to because I was widowed at a chronologically younger age. And nobody was talking about things like returning to the workplace while you're still grieving, helping your child when you can't even get out of your own bed yourself. How do you deal with some of the really goofy things that people are saying to you? I mean, most people don't mean to be goofy or hurtful, but sometimes they are. And how do you cope with that? And how do I get my benefits from the government? Am I even entitled to those? And then later down the line, it becomes, am I allowed to date again? Am I allowed to even think about that? What about intimacy? I mean, these are things that no one's talking about, and every single widow has on his or her mind. And it was a few years after Mike's passing that I just started jotting down everything that I'd been looking for and couldn't find the answers to. And when I finished jotting down those notes, because I'm old school, I still write things down on a legal pad, I wound up with the table of contents for Widows Wear Stilettos, which was the first book. And everything just, it went on from there. And we can get into the business aspects of taking a book from a legal pad to a bookshelf. But that is how Widows Wear Stilettos, the book, the community was born. is because I was simply looking for something. I was looking for something that didn't exist. And if you can't find it, create it. And hopefully I've played a small part in doing that.
Wow. And so what was the time period from you had this tragic incident to when you actually had finished? Like, what was that? How long was that?
It was 5 years between the time that I lost Mike, because see, it's not a memoir. I didn't think that my story alone, a standalone story about the wonder that is Carole Brody Fleet, tongue in cheek, was going to help anybody. But advice and insight and suggestions and roadmaps could. And I didn't feel like I could knowledgeably and wisely advise until I had actually gone through the legal transitions, the financial transitions, the emotional transitions, that I had dipped back into the dating pool. That's a whole other show. That I had done all of these things, and I could look at other widowed and say, here's what worked for me, or don't let this happen to you. Because I made mistakes too. And I am absolutely transparent in writing about some of the errors that I made with my grief recovery, with governing and trying to kind of marshal my daughter's grief recovery in a healthy, productive way. I'm very transparent about those mistakes in the book. So if somebody finds himself doing the same or similar things, they can say, wait a minute, there could be repercussions here. I don't want to do that. Some of the financial and legal mistakes that I'd made. Yes, people with legal degrees can still make legal mistakes because we don't know everything about everything. We don't know what we don't know. Well, hopefully, by providing education, by providing insight, and the reading audience is hearing it from somebody who has actually been there. They've walked the walk. They are not just rendering opinions. And that's important too. It's certainly proved important to my reading audience.
And so, like, if you could go back to yourself during that, your younger self during that period of time, knowing what you now know and having helped all of these people, what advice would you give to yourself when you were first starting to go through that?
Oh, that's easy. Shut out the noise. When you are in a place of grief, and everybody has suffered grief, it doesn't have to be spousal loss. Everybody has lost someone or something that they've loved. So we've all been there. And when you are grieving, you are vulnerable. If you're grieving the loss of a loved one, you are also likely exhausted. You are probably very short on sleep. You are probably not paying attention to things like nutrition, eating, you know. So you are vulnerable in all ways. And that makes you absolutely ripe for the picking for people who are not necessarily well intentioned. And that can absolutely devastate you. My first and best piece of advice to my younger self and to any other selves that are listening is shut out the noise, shut out the destructive opinions, shut out the energy drainers. You know, and I know you guys will agree with me. Everybody in the world, everybody in the world can be classed in two columns: energy givers and energy drainers. And I promise you right now, everybody listening is thinking about energy drainers. Nobody ever goes to the energy givers. They think about the people that absolutely drain the life essence out of them. The energy drainers are not going to help you in the first hours and weeks and months of your grief recovery. Get away from them or minimize them as much as you can. But the opinions of others when it comes to your life, they have to become inconsequential. They're not in your skin, in your house, raising your children, if applicable, having to get up every day and face what your life is. You have to tune in to you. By all means, seek opinion if it's going to be supportive, if it's going to be constructive, if it's going to lift you, if it's going to point you in the right direction. But when people start sentences with you should, you shouldn't, you always, you never, or at least, they are minimizing you. They are minimizing the importance of your grief. And you can't allow that to happen. It will serve you no purpose other than to keep you in a place of sorrow. And that's not where you are destined to live.
I mean, I just think people, just as a general rule, should avoid providing unsolicited advice.
Absolutely.
Just,
Absolutely.
like the people that I know that are at a high level, that know a whole lot, and they aren't the ones that are providing unsolicited advice on certain things.
Right.
It's the people that aren't that are ones that are the first people to say something. Oh, you should do this way. You should, like you said.
Mm-hmm. And when you had mentioned that I'd look at the humorous side of loss. Well, we all know that there's nothing funny about loss, but some of the things that happen as a byproduct of loss, we have to take a humorous look at. And one of those things is what's the things that people say. And some of the most ridiculous things that we've heard. And when we can kind of turn that on its ear and kind of have a giggle with it, we can move forward from the initial hurt of it. For example, my Hall of Famer was told to me at Mike's funeral, which was very large, very grand, and absolutely beautiful in splendor and tradition, everything that he deserved and then some. And somebody actually told me, a woman, at his graveside, I'm still staring at a coffin. She says, "You'll forget all about him when you get a new boyfriend." Now, digest that for a minute. I mean, I still don't have a response to that. I still don't. But rather than stay in a place of hurt and whiplash, because that kind of snapped my neck around, we learn to kind of giggle at it and shake our heads and say, "Oh, bless her heart," and then we move forward. And the stories are literally countless by this point, just tens of thousands of stories of what people have said that can be at best ludicrous and at worst destroy relationships, literally.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see that happen. So, the second tier of my job is educating the public on what to say and maybe what not to say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for that. I just think that there needs to be a manual. Because I think what happens is,
I have more of them.
Right. You have it, right? They get it. But I mean, I think you want to make the person feel better. You feel like you want to help them, but I think people get caught in the cliches and just some of those things, and it doesn't make the situation better.
No. And one of the biggest, of course, is "I know how you feel."
Right.
And I know how you feel is immediately followed by your tale of woe. Well, it's not your turn. If somebody says, "Ted, how did you handle it when, thus and such happened to you?" Then by all means, tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone is telling you what's happened, I would never say, "I know how I feel," because when Mike died or when he was battling, now all of a sudden the spotlight is on me. That's not where it belongs. It belongs on the person who is sharing with you. And it takes courage to share things like grief and pain and fear and despair and sorrow. So it's our job to listen and understand, not know, just understand.
Yeah, I think just sometimes it's best just not to say anything. Right? Just be there. Just be present for the person.
Listen. Just listen. A lot of people don't.
I think one of the biggest issues, I think people, they really want to say a lot of people want to say the right word to make it better. Right. And it's usually not, there's no word to make it better right then on those situations.
No, so but one of the most comforting things, if not the most comforting thing that I heard right in that moment was told to me by a colleague. And she said, "Carole, I cannot begin to imagine the pain that you're in right now." Because she was not widowed, but even so, even another widow, because pain is different. Yeah. Relationship perspectives are different. So she said, "I can't imagine the pain that you're in right now. But when you are ready to talk, I am here to listen." And I will never forget that. Because what she told me was she was willing to embrace the uncomfortable. No one likes to talk about death. Nobody likes to talk about loss. it's it's icky. Let's face it, it's not pleasant. So when someone says, I want to hear whatever you want to share, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to be there fully and hold a hand and wipe away a tear, that was the greatest gift in the world.
Mm.
And so that's what you do, is tell somebody who may not have anybody in their orbit that it wants to be there for them or can be there for them. You might be that person. When you say that, oh my God, what a gift that is.
Mm.
Yeah, I like how you spelled that out. I think you just gave somebody some ideas as far as how to be a better friend to someone who's in that situation. Um, and so we're currently in this pandemic,
Yeah.
and people are dealing with all kinds of tragedies just that are associated with that. Even if you talk about like a loss of job or something like that. So how has the pandemic impacted your mission and what you do?
Well, tragically, it has grown our community by leaps and bounds, especially among the younger widowed. It's certainly nothing that we want to see. We just are grateful that we're there to be able to welcome these people and to help them understand, and help any widow to understand that they are not alone, that they don't have to face their healing journey by themselves. That's, see, when you lose a spouse, the first thing you feel is absolutely cut off and isolated, and you feel alone, you feel absolutely adrift. And so when you can meet at least one other person who says, I get it, I've been there, I've done that loss, that right there is a great comfort. So it providing community to far too many widowed, that was probably the most immediate impact that the pandemic had on me. From a business standpoint, obviously, when a good deal of your job involves personal appearances, which is always my favorite aspect. Writing, I love, it's a passion, but it can also be a very lonely business because it's you and a computer. And I'm a people dude. I'm a people guy. I love people. So the personal appearances went away, the book signings went away, and that was difficult, but only from the standpoint that I was experiencing the same kind of isolation that we've all experienced in the last 20 months now that this has been going on. So those were two of the biggest impacts that the pandemic had on me personally.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear for our listeners that grief isn't just the loss of a loved one. It's any, we had a guest on previously that really made this clear, that it's any type of change that you didn't want could be considered grief.
Exactly.
So that could be, and I've experienced, like you say, I'm used to doing these public book signings, that now you can't do that anymore. Or
hugging, I mean, just hugging people.
Yeah,
that's so important. The just the physical connection that we have to each other, shaking hands. That was a huge loss for me, still is. Now that we have to kind of tamp down. We were starting to relax a little bit, and now we have to, we want to be careful again. It was I remember the first time I got back together with she's like my guru, my Zumba instructor. Shout out to Lori Salazar, I love you. She took her classes online, and she was a godsend to me over this last year and a half. Well, in the summertime, our class gathered again, 4th of July for the first time, outdoors. And we were all shocked at how emotional it was. We were crying when we were hugging each other for the first time in over a year. None of us, including myself, and this is my job, we were kind of taken aback at how emotional it was to get back together. So yes, we have been grieving more than just the loss of friends, loved ones, fellow citizens to this horrible, awful pandemic. But we have been grieving losses that we weren't even aware were losses as such until they weren't there anymore.
Wow.
And then, so you've authored these 4 books, and you got this international bestseller, The Widows Wear Stilettos. Let's talk about that. Like, who's the target audience, and how specifically is it going to help them?
Well, the target audience started out to be women who were widowed at a chronologically younger age, because I will never say it's more difficult. It is different. Most people, when I say widow to you, you'll picture somebody who has been maybe married for decades, and she is got, grandchildren and great grandchildren. And she talks about the good old days, which, is walking, to school uphill both ways in the snow, things like that. But widowhood's complexion has changed dramatically. Through events such as 2 U.S. involved wars in the last 20 years, of events like Oklahoma City and 9/11, and now, of course, the pandemic. The demographic of the widow has grown dramatically and exponentially to include widows who are 17 and 18 years old. And again, nobody was talking to that younger widow who's got issues that are different from our chronologically older sisterhood. That said, I'm delighted to have served widows as young as 17 far and up into their 90s, because so much of the advice transcends chronological age. And what I'm excited about in the second edition is I was allowed to expand my audience even more to include our widowhood, sister, and brotherhood in the LGBTQ community, because that is a community that is also underserved when it comes to matters of loss. I also like to talk to what we call the unmarried widowed. A lot of couples of all ages are choosing to remain unmarried for whatever reasons. And yet, when one of them passes away, the survivor is entitled to very little, and nothing from a governmental standpoint. But what are the legal rights? What are the emotional ramifications? The fact that oftentimes unmarried widowed aren't even allowed to participate in widowed support groups. I mean, what is that? So I wanted to talk to them too. So my target audience is started out as the chronologically younger widowed. It broadened to widows across the spectrum. And now it really encompasses anybody who has lost their spouse, however you define spouse to be. And then my second tier audience, like I said earlier, is the public. I want to educate those who surround the widowed, how to be supportive, practically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, how to do all that. When somebody comes to me and says, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say, I can help them too. For example, don't ever say, call me if you need anything. That sounds really helpful, doesn't it? That call will never come. That phone to a widow weighs 500 pounds. She or he will never pick it up. We all automatically feel like a burden because we're grieving. So that means we're depressing, we're downers, we're not fun right now. So picking up a phone and asking for, excuse me, asking for a favor, asking to talk, asking for companionship because they're lonely, it's not going to come. Be proactive. Pick up the phone. You take them to coffee. You say, hey, I'm going to go pick up the kids from school, or I'm going to go grab your groceries because I know you don't have anything in the house except some moldy cheese and a half-drank bottle of wine. That's what you do. You get proactive with it. It will never be rebuffed. So that's my second tier of my job, is to educate those who surround the bereaved in how to be the greatest source of support to them.
This just came to me. Like, have you done much work at all with like church ministries at all? I could just see that being sorely needed.
I have.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things to do is speak to synagogues and churches.
Yeah.
My own synagogue has been very gracious in that they've hosted me a number of times and let me quack. But yes, I have been very, very fortunate to speak to ministries and to speak from a spiritual standpoint, but in an ecumenical way, in a way that appeals to all faiths, all religions, it's very, very universal. Whatever you perceive your faith, your greater power, your higher power to be, I can talk to you about that too.
Yeah, I can just see that being useful for people that are, especially if they're new to their position and they've got to deal with this. If they understand kind of what not to say and what the
Right.
person's going through, and I think that would be
Exactly.
huge.
It is. It is. And it really doesn't even have to do with any one particular faith per se.
Yeah.
This, like I said, it transcends faith is, how do you deal with bereavement? And then how do
Yep.
you integrate faith into it? Especially, how do you do that when someone's having a crisis of faith? Because that happens to even the most devoted. What happens when maybe God isn't your pal right now? What happens if you're in crisis over that? So yeah, I've been excited to help counsel in that regard as well.
Excellent. Excellent. So, like we have entrepreneurs that follow us. That's like our primary audience. So, how does your message of what now and what next apply to that entrepreneur who's experiencing grief as it relates to things going on within the business?
Well, now I'm going to take off my grief recovery hat and I'm going to put on my business hat because I talk a lot about that too, because authorship, writing is a business. If you don't treat it as a business, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
So regardless of what your entrepreneurship looks like, this is going to help. First of all, hobby commitment will equal hobby results. There's nothing wrong with having a hobby. I absolutely advocate having hobbies, but if you expect your business to reward you, you can't have a hobby approach. Hobby commitment equals hobby results. If you have a business-minded approach, you will get business results. What does that mean? So many people talk about vicious rumors. So many people think that entrepreneurs, the self-employed, that we work whenever we want to and take off whenever we want to. No, you don't. It means you work when you don't want to, or when you would really rather be doing something else. It also means that you don't love your job 24/7. Every single job, even if you are the boss, has challenges. Every single job has really challenging days. You go to work anyway, because you know what? If you don't go to work, you don't get paid. I mean, that's just it. So you have to have the level of commitment that is going to yield business results. That's first and foremost. Get your commitment level up to your deserve level. Get those things on a parallel. The other thing that's really important is if you're an entrepreneur, you're in a position of leadership automatically. Whether you are working for yourself and you're a party of one, as I am, I still consider myself a leader. So that means that people are paying attention, hopefully, to what I have to say. If you have employees under you, if you're in the retail sector or the corporate sector, people are looking to you. It means you're a leader. Okay? Effective leadership means listening more than lecturing, which we touched on earlier in the grief recovery phase of the show. But now we're talking about business. Leadership means listening more than lecturing. The minute you quit listening to people above you or people who have gone before you or people who are more successful financially or with an audience or however you perceive success, the minute you stop listening to what they have to say, your failure as a leader has just commenced. Okay? The minute you stop listening to those who are coming after you, whether they are aspiring authors, whether they are your employees or your subordinates, the minute you stop listening to them, your failure as a leader is complete. So it commences when you quit being teachable and coachable and trainable, and it's complete when you quit listening to the people that you serve, because you either think you know it better or you know it all. It means listening more than lecturing. And when you do that, your stepladder to success never ends. It commands that you are teachable. When I decided that this legal pad would make a great book, I had no contacts in publishing. I knew nobody in the industry. I had no idea what to do. So the first thing I did was I got books. How do I do this? Well, you need a proposal. Oh, what's that? You mean I have to write more stuff? It's not like on TV where you take your manuscript and you send it off to a publisher. It is really, really, really not like that, folks. By the way, if any of you are aspiring authors, don't do that. Okay. That is the absolute wrong thing to do. But I got 2 books that told me what to do, and to the letter, I did them. And that is how I was signed by a literary agency 45 days after I started the publishing or the querying process in finding an agent. That's how it happened, because I got educated. And I've never stopped being teachable and coachable, especially in an industry that has changed so insanely in the last 15 years. It is not the same industry that I walked into, and you have to be willing to change with that. But that's the first thing I did, was I got educated, and then I did not decide I knew it already or I could do it better or my book is special, so I don't have to follow the directions. No. You are not special. You are one of thousands of people trying to get published. So when you do what you're told to do by the people who've gone before you with great results, great things are going to happen to you too. Isn't it weird how that works?
I'm telling you.
That is my absolute best advice for entrepreneurs. And I also want to remind you, I'm not writing a book on how to lose 30 pounds in a week, guaranteed bestseller kind of thing. And by the way, if anyone writes to write that book, I'll buy it. I was unknown and unpublished, and I am writing about the single most unpopular subject on the planet: death, loss, grief, bereavement. How do you make that uplifting? How do you make that positive? How do you make people want to pick up that book? How do you bring hope in this genre, especially when nobody knows who you are? And I've had people actually ask me that, when you want to talk about things that people say and energy drainers. So that I shared that to bring encouragement, that if somebody can choose to write in the most unpopular genre imaginable and still become successful, you can do it too.
Yeah, that's truly encouraging. So you mentioned this thing, and I love what you said. You said listening more than lecturing. I just think that's more important in today's workforce, just because people are leaving jobs at a record pace. You have people working for you, and you're not listening. You can create grief on your own, because you'll lose that key person.
That's right. That's right. And you can never hesitate to let people know their worth.
Yeah.
You have to let people know that they matter, that they're important, that they're not just employees or a time card or what have you. You have to recognize that that employee has they have family, they have a life outside of the four walls of an office or a store or whatever the confines of that employment looks like. And you have to be present for that. You have to be sensitive to that. You have to be affected by it, but not necessarily invested. And those are words that I borrowed from my daughter when she was 16 years old. And she gave me that advice when I was sitting in front of my computer reading a letter from a widow. And it was just some of these stories are heart-wrenching, and this one was no exception. And I'm sitting there crying, and my daughter says, Mom, you can be affected by these people, but you have to be careful about being invested, because then you're no good to them. And she was absolutely right. You have to have compassion. You have to be there. But if you let yourself become a pile of cooked spaghetti every time someone's telling you a sad story, you're not helping. You have to be somebody that they can look to and even lean on. And that is something that I would absolutely advise anybody to do. You can be affected by people without becoming invested and wrapped up. And you can have that line be, employer, employee. I understand that line. I understand that has to happen. But you don't have to be devoid of compassion either. And I think, tragically, we are still seeing that too often in the workforce today.
I never heard it put that way. Affected but not invested. Is that similar to empathize without sympathizing? Is that similar to that?
I think so. Like I said, I see myself for example, as somebody that I would like to think that a widow could turn to.
Yeah.
And if I am falling apart and now he or she has to do the consoling,
Right.
I'm not doing my job. I'm not helping.
Mm-hmm.
So I can absolutely sympathize on a widow level. I can definitely empathize. And also, 4 months after I lost Mike, I lost my father. So I had two whammies. The two men in my life were gone in a very short period of time. So I take that, and I'm certainly compassionate. And I am so blessed to when a widow chooses to trust to share her story with me or within our community. It's a blessing. But if I fall apart, if I become invested in this one story to the point that I can't, help, I don't see how that is productive. I don't see that is a positive aspect that I'm supposed to be sending into somebody's life, a positive message of hope, of promise, of yes, there is a tomorrow. Grab my hand. I'm going to show you how to get there. I can't do that if I'm falling apart. And that is what I see the difference between affected and invested is.
That's great. No, I think you just helped somebody there, especially if you're dealing with someone that works for you. I think that's very important. I mean, I think you have to be effective because you want to be able to.
And when I was an employee, I have seen I was so fortunate to spend most of my career with people who got it right, who knew being affected versus invested. And I also worked for people who really got it wrong. So I've absolutely been on the receiving end of this as well, of the employer employee, keeping the line and yet still being compassionate and understanding and working with somebody who is in a place where a corporate bereavement leave is 3 days. 3 days for bereavement leave. And then maybe you have some sick time and some vacation time to stack on top of that. We have to do better. We have to do better. And employers are in the position to help make that happen. And I know employers who have. And then some who will look at you and say, well, it's been a week. Aren't you over it? We have to do better.
Sure. And you're a regular contributor to the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. I mean, that's a huge deal. How did that come about?
It was a few years ago, and it was a publicist who said, you should submit to Chicken Soup for the Soul. And of course, I've been a fan for years. Who isn't? And I love their story, certainly as a writer. And it's a great lesson for anybody who has experienced rejection, which is everybody in the world over the age of 12. When Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen wrote the original Chicken Soup for the Soul, it was rejected over 100 times for a number of reasons. And then finally, a publisher took a chance on it. And now, all these years later, it is the best-selling book in the genre. It's sold over 500 million copies and climbing. There are Chicken Soup for the Soul collectors who actually collect volumes of Chicken Soup for the Soul. They didn't let rejection stop them. I've been rejected. I'm still rejected. It doesn't mean that somebody is rejecting you, the person. They just don't need what you're offering right now today. No doesn't mean never. Today is not forever. You got to remember that too. So that was a quick Chicken Soup story. I started contributing to them a few years ago because the publicist said, hey, you ought to give this a shot. And I've been very fortunate to have contributed to them 6 times now.
Wow.
That's awesome. I mean, that shows you the level of guest we have in our presence, because I mean, this, like she said, this is one of the best-selling books of all time, best-selling series of all time.
Yeah, they're wonderful to work with, and they're super varietal as far as all of the different audiences that they target and all of the different stories they tell. And I love reading the other stories just as much as I love contributing to them. The other stories are super inspiring and funny and uplifting. It's just a really positive experience being around all of the chicken soup family that I have.
And you've done, like we said earlier, 1,300 plus interviews.
Yes.
You've been on Good Morning America.
Mm-hmm.
First off, let's stop there. What was that experience like, being on Good Morning America? Yeah.
Fabulous. Deborah Roberts interviewed me. Shout out to Deb. She's awesome. But the entire crew was fantastic. The producer showed me how to hail a cab. I'm from Southern California. We don't hail cabs here, and I didn't know how. So, when you go to Vegas, they pull up to the curb in front of the hotel. I didn't know how to hail a cab. So the producer showed me how to do that. But they were just wonderful. And they were not hesitant. A lot of the initial reaction that I was getting from publicists even was, this is a pretty heavy subject for morning television. And I kept saying, give me a shot. It doesn't have to be heavy. We can talk about so many aspects just besides loss. We can talk about dating. We can talk about falling in love again. We can talk about remarriage. When I was on Good Morning America, I had a brand new boyfriend, and he was British, and he was super cute. And now he's my husband, and he's been my husband for 12 and a half years. So there are also very, encouraging aspects of the other side of widowhood and what that looks like. And Good Morning America saw that and said, come on to New York. And I love New York. So it was a wonderful experience from start to finish. I absolutely loved working with them.
Wow. Fantastic. So what's next? What's next on the horizon for you?
I have a new project in the works. I can't talk too much about it, but I will say that it is about some of the incredible changes that I underwent personally as a direct result of the pandemic. I am framing it as a husband's unintentioned wise words, a daughter's encouragement, and a girl named Lori. And that's about all I'm saying about it right now. But I never expected that this pandemic would wind up being really transformative for me personally and professionally, certainly, but definitely personally. And it kind of goes back to the story you told at the top of the show, Eric, about the farmer. And I love what you said about things happening for you rather than just to you. And once I got out of what's happening to me as a result of the pandemic, instead of what could happen for me, combined with a husband's wise words, a daughter's encouragement, and a girl named Lori, incredible doors began to open even before we could actually open physical doors and leave the house again.
Wow.
So that's what I'm working on now.
No, that's great. That's great. We may have to have you back on to talk about what once that's done and you can really talk about it and all of that. May have to have you back on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So we're at the final segment of our show today. It's called Write This Down. Right? This is where we want to have a specific message for the entrepreneurs who are watching us. Like what we'll each go around and give that closing thought that they need to write down so they can level up as it relates to their business and their lives. So Carole, you are the guest of honor. We'll start with you. What's the final thought you want to leave people with for Write This Down?
Final thought. I'm just gonna do a soundbite from 5 minutes ago. No does not mean never. Today is not forever. Okay. Do not take today's rejection as forever. It is no for today. It's not no forever. Don't quit knocking on the door until somebody tells you that the door is closed and locked and bolted. If you quit knocking on the door, no one's going to open it. Today is not forever. No does not mean never.
Oh my goodness, man, that's great. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, it helps to remember that, right? No doesn't mean never.
That's right.
You're going to hear the word no quite a bit.
Yeah,
in this business, you do.
Eric, you put me behind Carole Brody Fleet, who's such a successful author, this is tough. Um, I don't know. I just think that the biggest thing in this is it's all about resiliency, right? Just you face certain things. Yes, you got to take that time to deal with whatever it is, right? You need that time. It may be I don't think there's any way that you can, put your finger on how much time it takes for you to deal with whatever that grief is, right? And like we talked about, whether it's a loss, of of a loved one, or whether it's a loss of a job or an opportunity or whatever. You take that time to kind of, deal with that grief, and then that time to reset, right? And just kind of reset, and where what am I going to do now? Like again, like we're saying, the what now. And then once you kind of determine the direction there, then it's just starting to go. It's trying to get going again, because you had to stop for a minute, right? Once that happened, like your world stopped
Absolutely.
doing that,
That's right.
that situation. And no matter what that situation is, I mean, there's no one else that can tell you how to deal with it, right? And then people come to you and tell you to do this, do that, and this is how you should be managing it. And it's interesting that the same people that tell you those types of things in those situations, once they're dealing with that situation, they do the total opposite.
Isn't that interesting?
They do the total. Oh, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. You lost that job. You're gonna be fine. It always works out for you. Stay positive, right? And then when they lose jobs, like, oh, it's the end of the world. End of the world. And it's
It's
like,
important to honor your loss, whatever the loss is. Honor it, grieve it
yeah,
in your way and in your time. That is absolutely the truth.
yeah. So it's interesting. You just see so many people. Interestingly, I've seen some people that have had loss, and a lot of people will just write on social media, and they'll just put it out. And I always be like, man, like I could never do it like that, but that works for them. That's helped them get through it, I guess, right, and just let people know that they're what they're feeling and what they're going through.
It can be a wonderful tool, actually. That is another new chapter in the second edition, is addressing social media as a part of the healing journey, because that did not exist
Hmm.
when it was my turn at bat. So yes, and that can be uh, a wonderful arrow to have in your quiver when it comes to dealing with loss, is social media and a community of people who know what it is you're going through.
Yeah.
No, great points. Great points. So for me, yeah, I just believe that success isn't about having all the answers. It's really about asking the right questions, and
Mm.
especially asking the questions to yourself. Like if you
Mm.
go through a challenge, you go through a loss in business, a loss in life, I think the question to ask is, okay, what now? Right? And that's the spirit of the what now movement. You're asking yourself that question. It helps you to pivot. So because if you're not asking yourself that question, you just focused on the event itself, it's easy to just stop. And we all probably know people who they were going along and they had this event and they just never recovered. They just stopped. They're still
Mm.
living back in that time. They're telling you about the time when they scored 4 touchdowns in the football game and all the high school game. They haven't moved on, but I think you have to ask yourself what now.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it's easy, right? I don't want to tell you that if you lose a loved one or you lose that, oh yeah, you just ask yourself. That it's not easy, and it's a process and it takes time. But I do think I think if you can focus on the pivot, you ask yourself that what now, you give yourself a much better chance of moving forward, and then you
Absolutely.
can, yeah, I mean, you can be a blessing to someone else potentially who may be going through that thing. You've already been through it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And what now is, when they taught that there's this thing about 5 stages of grief. I don't
Mm-hmm.
ascribe to it because I don't have time for 5 stages. The thing happens, and my first reaction, because it's proactive, is what now? The fact is that we gravitate toward what we focus on. And if you focus on staying where you are in a place of loss, again, whatever that loss is, or grief, or sorrow, or despair, that's where you're going to stay. That's where your gravitational pull is going to take you. If you focus on what now, if you focus on what next, and then you get the tools to help take you to the answers to those questions of what now and what next, and you start designing how you want your healing journey to be, that's when everything does pivot, like Eric just said. That's when everything changes, like Ted just said about resiliency. That's when your resiliency kicks in. It kicks in by the doing. And the first part of the doing is saying, what now?
Man, let me tell you, this is one of those episodes I'm gonna have to go back when I'm in the gym and listen to. Yeah, you said so many tweetable things that everybody would benefit from. I mean, whether it's listening, more than lecturing, affected but not invested, no doesn't mean never. I mean, just a lot of gems that people need to really grasp to help them to level up and to move forward. So how can people connect with you to get more information, to get your books?
Well, of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So by all means, hit me up there. I'd love to say hi. Be sure to let me know that we've met through this show, because that'll be great. And shout out to these two great guys. If you or somebody that you know is or is facing widowhood, you can also find us at widowswearstilettos.com. There's all kinds of information for you, resources, inspirational messages. I provide a monthly message. It's a fantastic resource. If you're a member of the media, if you serve the bereaved community yourself, whether it's through ministry, hospital, hospice, any kind of organization, you can also find me at carolefleetspeaker.com, which has more technical kind of information and biographical information there.
Excellent. Again, we certainly want to thank Carole Brody Fleet for being such an excellent guest and sharing everything she shared. Make sure you go out, get a copy of her book. And speaking of sharing, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show. Listen to Carole Brody Fleet. Share the show.
Share the show. Hopefully, we helped you to laugh and learn and level up. Make sure you share the show. And don't forget, you can also listen to the replay of this episode on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and any of those other places you get your podcasts. So that's our show for this evening. Thanks again to Carole Brody Fleet. And until next time, have a great one.